In September 2001, New York City suffered a tragedy that rocked the world. 20 years later, it's been devastated by COVID-19.
Yesterday was the deadliest day in New York with more than 700 coronavirus deaths.
The crisis in New York reaching a critical mass.
After 9/11, the city came back stronger. What lessons can be learned from this revival to help New York recover from COVID-19? I'm Jon Fasman, the Economist's U.S. digital editor, and I'm also a New Yorker. In September 2001, I lived in Brooklyn. From this side of the river, you get a perfect view of the financial district, where the Twin Towers once stood.
The towers were right there, where Freedom Tower is now, where that gap is now.
The 11th of September that year started off as a beautiful day. But when I arrived on the east side of Manhattan, on my way to work, like many others, I saw a plane flying screamingly low. Shortly after I reached my office, the first plane hit. On that day, around 3,000 New Yorkers were killed. Many of the bodies were never recovered. Many of the scars will never heal. One of the many businesses hit hard by the tragedy was O'Hara's Irish Pub, one of the closest bars to the Twin Towers. It's been here since 1983. Co-owner Mike started working here not long after it opened, when O'Hara's was a popular happy hour destination for local office workers, including many that worked in the World Trade Center.
There were about 6 of us in here when the first tower collapsed. In an instant, this place was covered in dust and debris. It was like a snowstorm at night. It was pitch black.
And what was it like in the days that followed?
It was pretty miserable. You were devastated that your business was pretty much gone, and then it was tough finding out constantly that guys you knew were killed.
On top of the emotional and human toll, the physical damage was immense. O'Hara's is here, 1 block south from the World Trade Center. After the attacks, buildings all over this area were either destroyed or severely damaged. This area housed 30% of Lower Manhattan's office space. 100,000 workers were temporarily displaced. The city was given $20 billion of federal funding to rebuild Lower Manhattan. And 2 months after the attacks, a new city administration, headed by Mayor Michael Bloomberg, was elected into office.
New Yorkers have always made the sacrifices necessary to achieve a better tomorrow, and there will be a better tomorrow.
Dan Doctoroff was deputy mayor for economic development.
But we have to take this opportunity and turn it into something that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do.
The team didn't want to just rebuild the 16-acre plot of land that had been destroyed, but redevelop the whole city. It marked the start of a new era of huge municipal ambition. I've come to meet Dan at the jewel in the crown of New York's redevelopment program, Hudson Yards.
What we found was New Yorkers wanted to make the city greater than ever. They wanted to rebuild, and it was that attitude that when Mike Bloomberg and I and others came into City Hall, I think we drove to try and transform New York.
Built on the west side of Manhattan, on top of a storage yard for Long Island Railroad trains, Hudson Yards is a 28-acre mixed-use development of shops, homes, and businesses.
So this right here is the headquarters, Warner Media now, KKR, Wells Fargo in New York. And as you go further down, it's the headquarters for BlackRock and Facebook in the next building, and then Pfizer in the building after that. And there have been literally, I think, maybe 70 or 80 buildings built in this area over the last 15 years. This right here is a building I'm particularly proud of, the Shed. The Times of London called it the coolest building in the world, and it's almost like a transformer.
So what was here before
Nothing.
what we're seeing with
It was an empty open rail yard.
Transforming a derelict no man's land into a glossy new neighborhood wasn't cheap. Hudson Yards cost $25 billion. To fund it, Dan and his team had to get creative.
We got money to rebuild Lower Manhattan, but nothing for the rest of the city. And the city was facing a massive budget crisis. I mean, huge. And so we created the largest tax increment financing district ever in the United States, basically going to bondholders and say, trust us, if you build it, they will come. And they did, and you can see the results. There's been massive amount of buildings built, which will generate the city an enormous profit into the future.
But as the most expensive private property development in American history, critics have accused Hudson Yards of catering to a global elite rather than the local community.
What do you think you got wrong?
You know, I think that the biggest thing was the city became less affordable. More people came to this city than we accommodated in terms of housing production. That's still the biggest problem New York has today.
From 2010 to 2019, for every 5 new jobs created in New York, only 1 new unit of housing was built. Prices skyrocketed. You'd need to be a millionaire to buy a 1-bed apartment in Hudson Yards today, yet close to 1 in 5 people in the city live in poverty. This inequality was laid bare during the pandemic. Poor communities suffered much higher COVID-19 deaths than their wealthier neighbors.
And so we need a new model of inclusive growth that actually responds to the inequities that we've certainly knew were here before COVID, but are even that much more evident.
But stimulating growth is more of a challenge today than it was after 9/11. In the past year, the city has received $14 billion from the federal government, which is less than what it received after the terror attacks. Yet more than double the amount of jobs have been lost. Over by Ground Zero, businesses like O'Hara's have been hit hard.
So what's it been like over the past year or so since the pandemic for you guys?
Yeah, this one was a little tough. It wasn't just our little area that was destroyed, it was the whole world that was down.
What about government support during the pandemic? Do you think there's been enough? Do you wish the government had done something else?
I'm sorry, what?
What about government support?
I'm sorry? Government support, truthfully, really haven't had anything out of that.
At the start of the pandemic, the federal government launched a $944 billion fund for small businesses, the Paycheck Protection Program. But initially, only 12% of eligible businesses in New York City actually received it. Many more have since, but those who got the loan didn't always see the benefits.
You got the PPP loan to pay your employees, but nobody was open. So it just kept people off of unemployment, which they would have been getting with the extra bonus the same money anyway. So it didn't help anybody in that respect. And then they came out with the big restaurant relief fund. You know, most people didn't get anything.
Since the start of the pandemic, more than 3,000 small businesses in New York City have been forced to close their doors for good. One area that has been especially hard hit is Chinatown, a neighborhood in Lower Manhattan where nearly a quarter of residents live below the poverty line. It's an area that is often overlooked in times of crisis. After 9/11, roadblocks and subway closures made it impossible to access Chinatown. For weeks, 75% of the workforce was out of a job, but at the time, loans were only given to those closer to Ground Zero, and many here waited months before receiving aid.
Stop helping the rich, you know, with the money going to the buildings and the businesses and all, and stop robbing us, the poor.
During the pandemic, the city did not learn from these post-9/11 failures. Parts of Chinatown were again left out of a loan program for small businesses due to its shared zip code with more affluent neighborhoods. Support didn't come until July 2021, well over a year into the pandemic. But there's another challenge facing Chinatown. Since the pandemic began, an age-old problem has reared its ugly head: anti-Asian hate crime. In 2019, there was one case. In the first half of this year, there have been 102. Wellington Chen is the head of the Chinatown Partnership, a nonprofit that supports businesses and the local community, and he's had firsthand experience of this rise in anti-Asian racism.
Just a couple months ago, straight down the block, at the end of this block, a Chinese young man was walking home, and I see this stranger way in the back come running up to him, and he plunged an 8-inch butcher knife straight into his back.
Today, Wellington is going shop to shop, handing out whistles to Asian Americans so they can alert others if they are attacked.
Good, nice. We consulted a crisis management expert, and they said to us, every time after a crisis, they need to find who's the devil, and they need to find a scapegoat to blame. And unfortunately, this time is us with the Asian faces.
After 9/11, it was Muslim Americans who suffered. Across America, recorded anti-Muslim hate crimes increased from 28 in 2000 to 481 the year of the Twin Towers attacks.
They started talking about terrorism and so on. They started looking at me as if I was the one that did it.
Back then, the NYPD launched mass surveillance programs targeting Muslims, often without proof of wrongdoing, a practice that has since been widely condemned. This time, however, the NYPD has created a task force dedicated to stopping anti-Asian hate crimes. But many in the local community still feel unsafe.
It's causing a vicious cycle, because the more anxiety you create, the less chance of people wanting to come out, and it causes the business additional hardship. So we now have a second virus that we have no vaccine for.
To help communities survive tough times, it's clear affordable housing, support for small business, and effective policing are all essential. But that takes money. And it's here that the city faces another challenge. The outpouring of community after 9/11 kept people in New York. But this time, many of the city's wealthiest residents have left. By February 2021, a year after the pandemic started, almost half the residents in New York's business hubs had moved away. Just a 5% loss of New Yorkers making six figures would result in an annual loss of $933 million in tax revenue, roughly the amount allocated for the city's health department. New York has some huge challenges ahead. And while some post-9/11 redevelopment was a success, the city needs to learn lessons from what its leaders got wrong. In November 2021, New Yorkers go to the polls to elect their next mayor. The likely winner will be the Democratic candidate, Eric Adams. An ex-cop, he has vowed to reform the police department and help fight crimes against the Asian community.
I'm not new to this fight. I'm not new to standing up on behalf of people. It doesn't matter of the ethnicity. This is still our city.
He wants to expand local tax credits for low-income families, invest in underperforming schools, and improve public housing. And he has a pandemic aid relief plan that aims to cut the red tape, stopping people getting money today. But funding is going to remain a challenge.
Mayor Adams, assuming he gets elected, is going to have to be really creative in coming up with resources to make the kinds of investments that give people confidence in the future of the city.
What lessons did you learn from 9/11 that you think would apply to Mayor Adams' first year in office?
Leadership really matters. Having a vision that inspires people really matters. Bringing people back to this city matters. New York always comes back. It's just a question of how long it takes.
Thanks for watching. To read the Economist coverage of the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, click the link, and don't forget to subscribe.